I want you to close your eyes, unless you're listening to this while driving, in which case, just do this with your eyes open. Imagine all the plates that you're spinning right now. Your main job, your side hustle, your family, hobbies, friends, and your podcast. Maybe you've already added your podcast to the mix, or you're thinking about giving it a go, but you already have so many other things going on in your life. How do you make sure that none of these plates fall? My guest in this episode is Ana Gonzalez, the host of Biz Haps, a podcast that comes out 3 times a week. Ana will share what she does to ensure that none of her plates drop, and they are all things that you can also replicate. I'm Alison Fraser, host of Women Who Podcast, the show for side hustling women who are ambitious but time limited. Each week, I bring you real life stories and actionable tips to help you create and grow your own podcast. Let's get into it. My guest today is really well qualified to talk about how to squeeze so much into a jam-packed calendar. So welcome on, Ana Gonzalez.
Hi, Alison. Thank you for having me.
Can you tell us, so I'll just back up a little bit. I posted in a podcast guest collaboration group asking for guests who would be able to speak on particular topics, and you were tagged as this would be perfect for you. So what's going on in your life that makes you someone that we should listen to about trying to squeeze as much as we can into a jam-packed calendar?
Well, I'm going to say 3 words. I'm a solo parent. So I have been with my son, just the 2 of us, since before he was born. So that makes a packed calendar very easy to achieve. I think that the suggestion that I was made when he was born, or I'm trying to think of the word. I'm sorry. So another thing that you mentioned is the confidence to speak, because English is not my mother language. And sometimes I think of stuff, Spanish is my mother language. Sometimes I think of stuff that is fun and creative and smart, but it's slang in Spanish. So for me to translate it in English, it's hard. And sometimes words don't come to me really, really fast. But anyways, I was going to mention this suggestion that someone made to me when my son was born. He was maybe like 2 months old. I used to train karate and compete really, really hard before him. I went to train with some friends, and they asked me, "Where have you been?" And I'm like, well, I showed them my little my little ball of meat. It was like, well, this is where I've been. Like I've been so busy. And one of them told me, Anna, yes, having a kid will make you busy. But if you want to train, or you want to work out, or you want to do anything else that is for you, which I recommend that you do because it's healthy, is you're going to have to make the time for that thing that is important to you. And what is important to you, yes, you take care of your kid, but if you don't take care of yourself, you cannot take care of anybody else. So my recommendation to you, Anna, and from me to everybody else is, yes, life gets busy, it gets overwhelming, but we have to make time for whatever is important to us. I live by my calendar. Like if I don't have it in my Google Calendar, it doesn't happen. So I have slots created for whatever I have to do for work, or slots for my podcast, slots for onboarding calls, slots for taking my kid to karate, and slots for tucking him in bed, because otherwise time goes by and it can be 11 at night and I'm like, oh, you're still up? I forgot to tuck you in. It's not that I don't want to, it's that things keep going on and I just lose track of time.
That's actually a really good tip, to have things in the calendar already. And you mentioned the self-care and making the time to actually look after yourself. My word for myself this year is self-care, because I figure if I look after myself, everything else will just follow on. as it should. And we were talking just before we started recording that I've been for a run already this morning, and it's coming up for 6:35 on a Monday morning in New Zealand, because I wanted to get my run done. And I knew the only way I would get it done in my really busy day today is if I got up a little bit earlier and went when it was
Yeah.
still dark.
Yes, I do the same. I wake up at 5:30 in the morning just for me to be able to work out, because not because I want to be lean and slim and sexy. Well, I mean, that helps, but I want to be a mobile old lady. So that's my goal, to just be 70 years old maybe and be able to move and walk by myself and do stuff by myself, be independent. So that's why I wake up at 5:30 in the morning. I work out for half an hour and then I start my day. And I wake up my kid, I take him to school, and then I come back and start work.
So what do you do for your work? You mentioned that you do your work and you do your podcast and your solo mom with your son, and you do your karate and you train and all that. So is your work connected to your podcast, or is it separate?
Yes, it is connected to my podcast. Actually, what I use my podcast for, well, I work from home and that can be very lonely. My podcast helps me get to meet people who are very interesting to me because I interview entrepreneurs. So for my podcast, they come and tell me a quick story about their life down in the trenches. And we get the takeaways from that. We have a laugh, and it's a really nice time that we both get. I meet interesting people, and also I serve entrepreneurs. So whenever maybe they need help, I just offer them, hey, do you need help? And sometimes I have gotten clients from my podcast, and sometimes I have gotten very good friends from there.
That's cool how it's intertwined.
Yes.
Do you have a way, you mentioned how you have a slot in your calendar for onboarding guests. Do you try to do as much of the same task in one go, or is it just every day that you are doing that task?
Well, the onboardings are for clients. The podcast, I record 8 episodes every Wednesday. So Wednesdays are for podcast. The way I get my guests, I post on Facebook on groups for people who want to be on podcasts. And I have someone who helps me to respond to all of the answers that I get from that post. And she sends them a message. Hey, this is the link. Come here to apply. They apply. I see their application. And if they're qualified, I mark them in yellow. And then this person helps me to email them the link to book their podcast. We have a whole system about it. It's like very systemized so that we can get organized.
And by having only one day of the week to record those interviews, I guess that frees up the rest of your week then to do all your other work.
Exactly.
And you're not all over the place, like interviewing at one time on a Monday, and then in the afternoon on a Tuesday, and then Wednesday, you got 2 or 3. By having them all on the one day, I guess it's that batching thing, isn't it? That a lot of people talk about batching tasks together so that they're all in that zone for that task.
Yes. So sometimes I do interview people outside of those times that I have designated for the podcast, but that's only by request. So if I get an email like, hey, those time slots don't work for me, can we get another time? I look for a way to fill that time. But Wednesdays are designated for podcast. I batch 8. I put them in a spreadsheet and I mark them as complete or as a no-show or as a reschedule. And then I have a video editor who goes and edits a little bit of whatever needs to be edited. I usually try to make them just that for they to need as little edits as possible. And if they don't need edits, better. It's been also a way for me to get better at my English skills, because I know that sometimes I speak and it seems like I'm just blabbering. And I think that I said something and I didn't say anything. So it's been quite a journey. It's been helpful for me to learn a lot of stuff. The other thing that happens when I put those podcasts in the spreadsheet, we use an AI program. It's called Cast Magic, and I just upload them there. And that helps me to come up with show notes, with timestamps, it with even an email to send. But I just have an email that I send everybody whenever their podcast is out.
Wow, it sounds like a really good system. Have you always had a system? Did you have this system right from the start, or did you get to a point in your podcast where you're like, I really need a system?
We had them right from the start. Yeah, that made it so much easier.
And always recording, like, so you say you do 8 episodes a Wednesday. Are you putting them out every single day?
I record all the episodes on a Wednesday, and I put them out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, one at a time. So right now, I just recorded my episode number 67, and I think that I have episodes until May or June.
Wow. So getting ahead on your podcast is also something that you would recommend for people who are busy?
Yes. Yes, that way you're not just like running around like a headless chicken, like, oh, I have to record the podcast because it's supposed to be out tomorrow and I haven't done anything. Like if you batch them, you have plenty to go.
I thought I was doing really well to be 6 weeks in advance. So to be like 3 months, that's pretty awesome.
Thank you. Well, to be honest, I did not expect so many people wanting to be on it. So I'm booked out, and I mean, my calendar opens every day, more like every week because I only record on Wednesdays. And that's how it's been working. But I started to be booked out very soon after announcing that I was doing that.
Which is always a good sign.
Yeah. Well, it's fun. It's very short. It's a 5-minute podcast. And everybody has a story to tell. So everybody wants to come and tell me a story.
I agree with you on that, because I meet a lot of people in my day-to-day life and they're like, oh, I don't really have anything to talk about. It's like, no, you have a story. You just don't know what it is yet. And there'll be lots of people who find some aspect of your life really interesting. I mean, I have a day job, and I was talking to one of my colleagues, and she grew up in Papua New Guinea because her parents were missionaries, and she can speak Pidgin. I thought, this is actually really fascinating. Can you still speak Pidgin? Yes, I can. And she just starts chattering away, and so you never know what you've got going on.
Yes, I used to be like that. I guess that our own story is so familiar to us that we don't think that it's a story that people want to hear. And sometimes it happened to me a lot that people would tell me, oh, okay, tell me something good. What's going on? Or tell me a story about you. I'm like, what do you want to know about me? There's nothing to say. But little by little, you learn that there are things that you have lived in your life that other people have no experience with. So they can learn. And then when you share that, you also learn from that.
Yeah, that is very true. And can we go back to some tips on how to squeeze things into a jam-packed calendar? I'm intrigued, Anna, do you do online grocery shopping? Do you have your groceries delivered to you to save time?
Yes. I don't have them delivered, but I do. There's this thing called curbside. I do online shopping, and I just go to the grocery store. They put them in my trunk, and then I just leave. And it's so easy and so fast, and I know exactly what I'm going to spend. Because if I go to the grocery store, I go into the rabbit hole of, oh, is this better than this other thing? And I see nutrition facts and like I compare stuff. And then I see some other thing, like I see shiny objects. And then all of a sudden, I think that I'm going to spend this amount of money, and then I'm like, oh, I'm spending this other different kind of money. So whenever I do it online, I know exactly what I'm going to spend. I can compare nutrition facts and everything, but it's so much faster. Or I just do it like on my like before going to bed, or if I'm in the restroom, or if I'm like cooking something and waiting for water to boil, I just do it at those times.
And I suppose picking up your groceries is in your Google Calendar.
Yes,
Yeah.
because otherwise I will forget.
What else do you have that's almost automatic, but you have a system for it within your life that fits everything you've got going on in?
Well, if I want to get something done, it has to be on my calendar. Almost automatic. Like I have meetings at 8:30 in the morning. Those are on the calendar. If we have another meeting after that meeting, maybe it's not set, but we have a time called flex time. So that's where we can put another meeting. And then I have work, or like for onboarding calls, since I don't have them always, I just have a gray area where I'm available, but I know that that time is for me to take onboarding calls. I have the time, like, oh, I gotta pick up my kid from school. I'm still available at that time, but it's in there because I know that I have to pick him up, and I will not forget. But it's like a reminder for me to, okay, you need to stop because you need to be doing this. I have then when I have to take him to karate, I have if he has to go to the doctor or if he has counseling or whatever, it's in my calendar. Go to bedtime for him, it's also in my calendar. Anything that I have to do during the weekends, it's also in my calendar. Everything is there.
Wow. I'm actually in awe because every year I think, right, I'm going to put everything in a diary and I'm going to use my Google Calendar, and I'm all right for like a week. And then I just forget to put things in there. I mean, with doing interviews, I've got, the Calendly app. So I'm always, and I've got the workflow set up. So I get a reminder, hey, you've got this interview tomorrow at this time. And it's like, of course I do. So then I'm going to, get up a little bit earlier and do all my other things first. But yeah, I've not been quite so, I was going to say regimented, but that sounds, that's a bit negative for me, but organized to have everything in a calendar like that.
Well, I used to not have everything on my calendar, but when I started, it kind of gave me a dopamine hit. Like every time I saw something and I was like, oh, done. It gives you the dopamine hit, and it makes you keep going. Like
Yeah.
this is how my calendar looks.
Oh, wow. And it's just showing me his screen, and it's got so many slots on there that are filled in.
It's just blocks of space that I
Yeah.
have for
And
certain things.
and different colors too for different
Yes.
things. Yeah. That's cool. That's a good little tip. You mentioned the dopamine hit. I do that with to-do lists.
Mhm.
Someone told me years ago, oh, the first thing you should write on your to-do list is to write a list. So then once you've written your list, you can automatically cross something off, and that makes you
Yes.
feel good. And it's like, oh yeah, so it does.
It does. I love to-do lists. I have a lot of them too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Me
they're in my
too.
phone.
Oh, see, mine are in a notebook, and I'm writing to-do lists, and then I kind of do a couple of pages of other notes, and then my to-do list kind of gets forgotten about. But I do generally do the stuff on the list.
Yes. I love having them on notebooks, but since I don't take them with me everywhere, I forget. So I make the to-do list, but I don't cross it off, and I just forget about it. But if I have it handy on my phone, I'm crossing everything off.
But it's not the same on your phone. I mean, I guess that you could just like add a little tick on, but it's that whole writing or just like scoring something out with a pen that's really satisfying.
It is very satisfying, yes.
And how long can you see? Are you going to do your podcast forever? Like, is it part of you mentioned how it's part of the business. So I guess for as long as you're in the business, you'll be doing the podcast.
Well, I hope so, because it's so much fun.
Yeah. Could you see yourself maybe extending to 5 days a week?
Yes. Not right now, but yes, I mean, right now I can say that I would love to do that. And that's in theory. In practice, I don't know, because I wouldn't be able to do any other thing.
Mm.
And having variety is healthy and good.
Yeah, variety is the spice of life.
Yes, exactly.
What does your son think about you podcasting?
Oh, he thinks it's so cool.
Good.
He came a few days ago and he was like, "How can I help you?" I'm like, "Well, do you want to learn how to edit a video?" Yeah. He's I don't think he's learning. I think he was playing Roblox all the time. But yeah, he thinks it's cool.
How old is he?
He's 9.
9. So yeah, so at the age where you can kind of start them learning these skills, but only for as long as they can hold that attention.
Oh yeah. It's starting to wear off. Which is okay.
Do you ever play your podcasts in the car where he can hear your voice and be like, that's my mum?
I don't. He has heard me do it live, so I don't play my podcast. I don't listen to it. I don't do it.
But what a legacy for him though as well, once he's older.
Oh, maybe.
Once you're older, like your voice is going to be out there forever.
Oh, that's a good way to put it. I didn't think about it. Yeah, I guess so.
Is there anything else you'd like to one thing I always like to ask my guests is, what tip do you have for any future podcasters or people who are just starting out?
Have a system in place. Maybe not, if you don't have a VA to help you, you can just have a system, just have the systems in place, make a simple landing page with, I don't know, a 1-minute video of you talking about your podcast, who you're looking for as a guest, why you're doing this podcast, a button for them to apply, and then a form. I have a form after this button in my landing page, and a form for them to put their name, their email address, what they're going to talk about. I think that has helped a lot. And also to have like a list of questions, possible questions that you want to ask your guests.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure if I still got those questions on there on my automatic workflow. But yeah, no, that's actually really good. I never really thought about having a Google form because I normally just reach out to people myself. But I've had the occasional person come to me saying, "Can I be on your podcast?" Like, well, what would you talk about? Actually, I had a really good example last week. I had someone pitch. So my podcast is called Women Who Podcast. So Anna, who do you think I'm looking for as a guest for my podcast?
Women who podcast.
Yeah. I had an email from a man who doesn't have a podcast.
Why? How?
I think it was just one of those copy and paste, send to as many different people as possible. But seriously, and that's a tip from me, is if you are wanting to go on other people's podcasts, at least find out if you are a good fit for them. So You've got your questions, Anna, for your podcasts to qualify people. Mine is kind of in the title. But
yes. Well, there's people who don't read. And I'm guessing that person didn't read, or it was their assistant who didn't read. But yeah, it has helped me a lot to have a landing page with a video about what the podcast is about, a button for them to opt in and to answer this Google form. And with that Google form, I have all their data, and I go in and read and see if they're actually qualified, or if I need to dig in a little bit more and reach out to them and be like, "Hey, you answered this, but how do we move from here?" And also for them to opt in gets them in my newsletter, or in our newsletter. So we start a relationship with them.
That's another really good tip. Before we wrap up, Anna, can you share a couple of podcasts that you like to listen to?
There is the Do Zone with Josh Thomas. I really like that one. I have also liked there's this podcast called Akimbo. And sometimes it's long. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not really good with long podcasts. It's like an hour long. And sometimes I'm like, I don't have this kind of time, but it's interesting.
Well,
And also there's this Billie Jean Offends the Internet. It's really short. It's about marketing. And it's really fun to me.
okay, I will put links to those in the show notes. And I'll put your links in the show notes too, but do you want to just tell us where we can find you while people are on their phones and they can look you up?
Well, if you're an entrepreneur and you would like to come and tell me a story, you can go to bizhaps.com. That's BIZ as in zebra, HAPS.com and apply to come and tell me a story.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anna, for sharing your tips and how you've made everything work, being a solo mum of a now 9-year-old and fitting in everything into your calendar. It's been awesome to chat.
Thank you. It was really nice meeting you.
Thanks again, Anna, for sharing your experiences and tips on how others can ensure none of their plates get dropped. What actions are you going to take to help your podcast and everything else you have going on to stay on course? If there's a podcast challenge that you're up against, just let me know. I'm a firm believer in a problem shared is a problem halved, and you never know who else is up against the same issues. You can send in an email to alison@alisonfraser.co. You may have heard that I'm opening up my show notes to other podcasters, so if you want your name and podcast mentioned, you can get featured by joining my Patreon. It's just $5 a month, and all details, as well as links to Anna, are in the show notes. Thanks for listening. That's it from me this week, and I'll speak to you again soon. You've been listening to Women Who Podcast, the podcast for women with something to say.